Welcome to Queer Cinema Catchup's monthly video essay series. In honor of Taylor Swift's 12th album, The Life of a Showgirl, I'm going to wade into a controversial topic, Gaylor Swift. We did an episode on Gaylor, or the theory that Taylor Swift is queer, way back when we first started the podcast in April of 2024. Check it out if you're interested in learning about what Gaylor is, though please forgive me for my very enthusiastic, somewhat loud new podcaster energy. In this essay, however, I don't want to describe Gaylor. I want to ask, is it okay that a Gaylor Swift theory exists? Is it valid to interpret an artist's lyrics through a queer lens if they've never presented as anything but straight? Is it invasive to speculate on whether or not something or someone is queer via their art made for public consumption? In short, I'd like to explore the ethics of sexuality speculation. To begin answering this question, let's go back to January 4th, 2024, when the New York Times writer and editor Anna Marks published an opinion piece on Gaylor Swift titled, "Look What We Made Taylor Swift Do." The article outlined why the speculation exists, suggesting that it is the intentional byproduct of Swift signaling a queer identity through her work. In this piece, Marks acknowledged that this discussion might seem salacious or controversial for a number of reasons, but underscored the need to stay open to queer interpretations and signals to create space in our culture for non-normative narratives. In other words, Marks is asking her readers to, quote, acknowledge the sapphic possibility of Swift's work. If you go to that article on the New York Times website today and peruse the comments, you'll get a sense of the overarching reaction to the piece. Here are a few of the comments identified as readers' picks on the Times webpage. I am happy that Taylor got her music catalog back under her control, where it belongs. Too many musicians are taken advantage of by shady and dishonest managers. Congratulations and more power to you, TS. As for Taylor's sexual preferences, that is none of my business, or for that matter, your business. I don't understand the point of this article, but I feel greasy for having read it. Plus, wasting 15 minutes of my life. And another comment. Swiftie here. Gaylor theories, as they are called within the community, are an invasion of privacy and best kept to the gross corners of fan fiction websites, which they largely came from. If she's not straight, which is an assertion I doubt, let her tell people on her own terms. Don't out someone not comfortable to come out of the closet, and don't devote so much time to theorizing about her sexuality. Yes, people can speculate about celebrities, but there is a very real harm that could come out of speculation on someone's sexuality. My fellow Swifties, save the rabid theorizing for Reputation Taylor's version. One more. I know Miss Swift is a, quote, public figure, but this detailed and long analysis seems self-serving and invasive to me. Even public figures deserve to be what they want to be and show what they want to show of themselves. While Marks's article mostly analyzes 4 consumption elements that Swift has intentionally put out into the world, lyrics, aesthetic choices, the Easter eggs Swift has encouraged her fans to look for in her art, these comments suggest it's wrong to interpret these through a queer lens because there's something specifically gross about questioning someone's sexuality, which to me feels strange because art is for interpretation and queer theory and queer readings are a legitimate analytic tool. And I feel it's important to note there's nothing wrong or gross about being queer. Beyond the average reader, though, there was additional backlash. Wright, the first American country singer to come out back in 2010, who has discussed the pressure to stay closeted within the music industry, took valid issue with the article for opening with a graphic description of her suicide attempt in 2006. Wright tweeted, quote, I was mentioned in the piece, so I'll weigh in. I think it was awful of @New York Times to publish, triggering for me to read, not because the writer mentioned my nearly ending my life, but seeing a public person's sexuality being discussed is upsetting, end quote. Later, CNN reported that, quote, associates of Taylor Swift had something to say about the article as well. Someone, quote, close to the situation, unquote, told CNN the following, quote, because of her massive success in this moment, there is a Taylor-shaped hole in people's ethics. This article wouldn't have been allowed to be written about Shawn Mendes or any male artist whose sexuality has been questioned by fans. There seems to be no boundary some journalists won't cross when writing about Taylor, regardless of how invasive, untrue, and inappropriate it is, all under the protective veil of an opinion piece, end quote. New York Times readers, other musical artists, and musical associates all seem to agree that sexuality speculation is unethical and inappropriate, a word which to me means improper, offensive, distasteful, maybe even disgusting. For now, let's stick with invasive, a word I can get behind, even though I do think audiences are allowed to interpret art however they see fit. Nevertheless, interpretations held up as evidence for what's really going on in an artist's private life arguably go too far, particularly if those interpretations could be dangerous for the artist in question. Historically, queer people could not be out, at least not without serious consequences. For much of the 20th century, queerness was often criminalized and or pathologized, leading to true social risk and isolation, not to mention the impossibility of working and making a living as an out artist, which did lead to queer coding and signaling. David Bowie, who came out as bisexual in 1972, Elton John, who first came out as bisexual in 1976 and then as gay in 1992, and Freddie Mercury, who never came out before passing away from pneumonia brought on by AIDS in 1991, all played into fluid expression of gender and sexuality prior to the truth of their identities being revealed. Even as things began to change, closeting persisted. George Michael, Ricky Martin, and Lance Bass being prime examples of artists who were closeted. What this means, in the past, it was dangerous to out someone and continued to feel dangerous as the world shifted for many. While we're in the bright moment of Chapel Row and dominance and what feels like more out queer artists in general, we're also increasingly in a darker political and cultural moment where there is very real and dangerous backlash against embracing queer identity. That said, being out publicly doesn't come as at high of a cost as it once did, at least for now, so long as we defend the legal and social wins of the last decade. But what is the cost for an artist in a more progressive age? I think the easiest way to understand it is to look at an example from the 90s. Though a more controversial figure today, Ellen DeGeneres did much for the mainstream acceptance of LGBTQ plus people when she came out simultaneously on her sitcom Ellen in The Puppy episode, and in Time magazine with her Yep, I'm Gay cover story in 1997. 42 million people watched The Puppy episode, and it won the Emmy for Outstanding Writing in a Comedy Series. But the aftermath of this historic, consequential decision was not as bright. Major sponsors like JCPenney pulled their support from the show. Parental advisory warnings began to play before every episode. The show was canceled within the year, and Ellen DeGeneres, as well as Laura Dern, who played Ellen's queer crush in The Puppy episode, were blacklisted from work in Hollywood for a time. We're almost 30 years removed from Ellen coming out, but the financial calculus, as well as the ability to create and reach an audience, is arguably still on the line. Arguably because of all the out queer artists who are currently dominating, like Chapel Roan. Regardless of how necessary it might be, staying in the closet or even going further and propping up a very heteronormative image for PR is a business strategy, whether we like it or not. Bringing it back to Swift, I'd like to argue that debut era Taylor, the country singer with a few hits, probably faced a steeper cost when it came to how she was perceived. The wrong perception could have meant Swift never became the household name she is today. Post-Eras Tour Swift certainly has a lot to lose, but only because she has climbed so high. No one can stay on top forever, and Swift has solidified her place in music history, and presumably her financial security as well. In CNN, Taylor Swift's associate argued, "We have a quote, Taylor Swift-shaped hole in our ethics." But I have to wonder at whether or not the associate had an ethical blind spot of their own. How do we view the costs not of speculation, but of outing someone exceptionally powerful and artistically influential? What's interesting is that this associate, in their response to Anna Marks, did not compare Swift to an artist of similar power. Instead, they cited Shawn Mendes as a comparable example, which I personally found a little strange. First, because there is another celebrity who leans into queerness in his style and art while also having very public relationships with women, who once even dated Swift, that seems like the more obvious comparison: Harry Styles. Styles is evidenced by the legion of Larrys, or fans who believe Styles and his former One Direction bandmate Louis Tomlinson were, or still are, in a secret relationship, has a similar cultural cachet and devoted fan base that can edge into parasocial territory. It should be noted that fans like this contain a range of people, from those who like to dissect the songs of their favorite artists from a queer lens, to those who like to wonder about Swift and Styles' true, not for public consumption, private lives, sometimes even venturing into what I would call dangerous conspiracy, with talk about fake marriages and fake babies. The question, though, is dangerous to who? I'd say yes to the celebrities who are, to bring it back to the word I can get behind, having their lives invaded in disturbing ways. Perhaps even more dangerous, however, is to those attached to this false version of reality, especially when the goalposts for when the truth will come continue to move, as they always do with conspiracy theories. In spite of this invasion, it's important to note that Styles and Swift utilize queer imagery and themes while also celebrating and supporting the queer community. Whatever their motives, allyship, identity, finding profit in a strong LGBTQ plus fan base, the reality is they both fold these rumors into their brands for the fans who want to see it. Put another way, queer fans can choose to see Swift's song Betty as evidence of the songwriter's ability to tap into queer love, while straight fans can embrace the songwriter's explanation that the entire album on which Betty exists is an exercise in fiction. That's also why pointing to Shawn Mendes in this CNN statement felt off to me. Mendes was very young when the speculation began and admitted he found the rumors hurtful and challenging. Later in 2024, Mendes told an audience at the Red Rocks Amphitheater the following, quote, "The real truth about my life and my sexuality is that, man, I'm just figuring it out like everyone. I don't really know sometimes, and I know other times, and it feels really scary because we live in a society that has a lot to say about that." The Heartstopper star Kit Connor gave similar voice to the unfair pressure young artists might feel to label themselves when he was forced to address backlash to photos of him with a woman. He tweeted, quote, "Back for a minute. I'm bi. Congrats for forcing an 18-year-old to out himself. I think some of you missed the point of the show. Bye." End quote. It would seem that Swift's team wants to tie his disapproval of Gaylor to a Mendes or Connor-like feeling. The pressure is too great. I don't know how to answer for now, but I will tell you all that is wrong with this speculation. So when considering all of this, is it actually wrong? I don't think there is a black and white answer. For me, I'll never go back to listening to Taylor Swift without a queer lens, regardless of whether she's secretly queer or not, because I find the music richer, deeper, and more interesting thanks to that lens. Does that make me an invasive Gaylor harassing Taylor? Or am I in the gray? Just a girl who likes to analyze and loves queer readings. What about Redditors chattering about the big plans for Taylor and other celebrities to eventually someday, when the moment is right and all the stars align, expose the homophobia of the entertainment industry by coming out together in a grand mass movement type of event? Are they harming Taylor or perhaps just themselves? How about journalists and our fans angry about queer baiting or hopeful for more queer representation, poking at young people like Kit Connor before they're ready to come out? In truth, I long for a time when queer identity isn't such a big reveal, even for the most mainstream feminine of artists or the most primetime manliest of athletes, where speculation about queer identity is seen the same as speculation about heterosexual identity. Because in truth, we speculate about straight adults all the time. Most recently, I'm thinking of Liam Neeson and Pamela Anderson's press tour for The Naked Gun, with their chemistry sparking rumors that they were romantically involved that they had to address in interviews. Maybe in the future, we'll rightfully chide people who speculate about kids, as we did when there was too much fan interest in the romance of the Stranger Things actors in early seasons, but see our interest in the love lives of adult celebrities as something human, if a little embarrassing, something we chat about sometimes, whether or not it's very elevated or highbrow or classy to do. There is nothing wrong with being queer, and so it shouldn't be wrong to wonder if someone is queer. And yet that's not the world we live in, at least not yet. Let me know what you think about the ethics of sexuality speculation in the comments, and thanks so much for listening to this month's Queer Cinema Catchup video essay. Check out our full-length episodes released every other Thursday, including the review we did of The Life of a Showgirl a few weeks back. And if you really want to go far back, the original Gaylor episode we did in April of 2024. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll see you next month for another video essay. Bye.